Tonight, second time around, we got Tim R. Shorts, and he's a TV personality. He's been on The Unexplained, he's been on Ancient Aliens, and a slew of other paranormal TV shows. He's a paranormal researcher. He's an author of many books, and we're going to be talking about those books today. And he's a radio talk show host with the Paracast. He's also too. A lot of people don't realize this, but he was a former news reporter for WHIO TV. He's been to the Great Wall of China. He's been to a bunch of places. We could probably talk about that today. He's written books on Nikola Tesla, Admiral Byrd, the Nazi UFO time traveler, tropical spells and hoodoos, Jeff, the talking mongoose. So yeah, he's been busy. And one of the books right here I have, you'll see it in a minute here. Mimics. It just disappeared. Okay. There we go. Mimics. But anyway, um, Tim, tell us how you got started with the paranormal. What was your first book? Tell us the whole shebang.
Sure. Well, I want to start out by saying thanks, guys, for having me back on your show. It's always a real pleasure talking to all of you, and I hope your viewers enjoy tonight's show as well. Um, Gosh, my first book. What was my first book? I was writing magazine articles for Timothy Green Beckley when he was publishing UFO magazines like UFO Universe and official UFO reports, magazines like that. He had several of them. And he approached me one time and wanted to know if I wanted to um, take over a contract that he had with a writer named went under the pseudonym of Commander X. And Commander X had a contract to write a book about time travel, a book about invisibility, and I think a book about teleportation. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it was those three. And unfortunately, Commander X was having health problems and was not going to be able to finish these books. And I was like, well, sure, if you're going to pay me, right? And Ed Beckley, bless his heart. I've worked for other people that never pay, even though they promised to. Beckley always paid. Beckley always paid his writers, and one of the few people, that actually did. So I said, yeah. And so the first book actually was the time travel book that later has been revised in several different forms, including, to a certain extent, our most recent one, Weird Time, Exploring the Mysteries of Time and Space, which Paul has a number of really great chapters in it. So yeah, the thing, Beckley sent me then all of Commander X's notes and paperwork that he had pulled together in preparation for this book. And he was going more for the metaphysical side of time travel, astral projection, maybe like ancient magic spells, things like that, which are great. I wanted to include all of that, but I also wanted to include stuff that was going on now. And, I grew up with these great books by, Brad Steiger and John Keel. And all of these books were always full of these stories of people who had personal experiences. And I wanted to include stories like that. So that was really my start writing books was time travel, teleportation, and invisibility. I also, around the same time, wrote a book on my own called, gosh, what was that called? I can't remember the exact title of it now, but it had to do with Black Project aircraft and things like that that maybe using exotic technologies, anti-gravity, things like that. Uh, uh, that one was really my first book entirely on my own. When the time travel and invisibility books included some stuff that had been put together by Commander X. So that was kind of a convoluted way there, Paul, to answer your question. So I mean, there was like four books that all came out around the same time that I had my hand in. I mean, I was thrown face first into the fire to put these books together.
And Tim, they just recently did a review of your latest book, Weird Time, at 14 Times Magazine. And it seems like they gave you really a good thumbs up on it. You want to tell us about that review?
Yeah, not too long after the book first came out, I was approached by one of the editors of 40 and Times, possibly Nigel Watson, who always contributes chapters to our books, may have mentioned this book. Nigel Watson also writes columns for 40 and Times. And if you're not familiar with 40 and Times, 40 it's still a published magazine, a slick cover, slick page magazine that comes out of England and has been published for forever. It seems like it's at least more than 20 years old. I couldn't tell you exactly when it first started uh, being published. So of course I said, yeah, if you want to if you want to review the book, I will be more than happy to send you a physical copy. And I have to admit, I approached this with some hesitation because 40 and Times can be rather rough on reviewing books. Um, in the past, they reviewed a couple of Beckley's books that I wasn't involved with, and the reviews were scathing to say the least. They 40 Times tends to favor more um, academic style type books on the subject, but believe it or not, whomever reviewed our book actually ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I mean they said they liked it for all the reasons that I like books, like this with all the stories, and they the reviewer did give us um, uh, uh, some guff about not being as efficient on fact checking certain stories. And he gave one example of a story we had about a guy who may have done some interdimensional traveling, and a pair of pants that he was given uh, during his soiree. The original source said that the manufacturer of the pants had stopped manufacturing a number of years ago, and the reviewer had noted that with just a little bit of fact checking, they found that the manufacturer was still in operation. And I have to admit, that was something that never even occurred to me when I was putting the book together. So I mean, it just goes to show you that I mean, you put together a book the size of Weird Time, which I mean, 300 plus pages. Facts like that can tend to get away from you. But I do say that we always try to do as good a job as we possibly can, vetting our subjects and making sure that we have all the information that is available to us to, just so our reader can have confidence that the stories that we're putting out there, are true to the point that we can find the proper information on them. So yeah, I mean, it was very nice of 40 and Times to give us um, such a great review. I mean, I don't know how that'll if that would translate to any more sales, Paul. Yeah, but it'd be nice to think so, right?
Yeah, I used to have some good, well, I used to have a really good connection over 14 times. And when I went to Amsterdam, I actually investigated a haunted place at the red light district. So they actually published that story, and it got a, it got a lot of people's attention. It was interesting.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have a subscription. I've had a subscription to the magazine for a number of years. I've had to shift over to an e-subscription because it's since it's published in England, it has to be shipped over to the United States. They don't have a a printer here in the States to put out issues, so the subscription rates for the physical copy got rather high, but it's manageable with a e-subscription.
Yeah, it's a very good magazine. You also too you put out uh this one,
Mm-hmm. Alien artifacts.
Alien Artifacts. And can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Yeah, well, this was a work that was already in progress with Timothy Green Beckley's Global Communications, Interlight Publications. And we were already in the process of gathering information, even had some chapters put together, not completed, but just, maybe a very rough idea of what we were wanting to include in the book. And then unfortunately, Tim passed away. So after a while, I got together with Sean Castile and the other writers who were contributing to this book, such as yourself, and said, "Let's finish this book, um, and we'll put it out under my publication name, Zontar Press, rather than Interlight Publications." We were also putting together at the same time, because Tim Beckley always had about 5 books at the same time in various stages of preparation to be published. That was the wonderful thing about him, is that he could juggle that many books at one time with everybody putting stuff together for them. And previous to Alien Artifacts was a book called Dulce Warriors, about the supposed underground base at Dulce, New Mexico. Yeah, yeah, that one was really fairly close to being finished. So Sean and I went ahead and finished that, filled in the remaining chapters that hadn't been done, did the formatting, did the cover, and then actually released it under Tim Beckley's Global Communications and Interlight Publications, and that one's gotten some really nice reviews as well. But then afterwards, yeah, we put together Alien Artifacts, which to me that's always been a fascinating subject. The idea that people have collected. I mean, it goes beyond the crashed flying saucer scenario. Places like Roswell and Aztec and others that aren't as well known, not just in the United States, but all around the world. But we also wanted to include situations where people found yeah, bits of metal and other kinds of strange, seemingly exotic material uh, from locations where there had been either UFO activity or maybe even suspected crashes. And we also included things like, say, like damaged trees or even properties, houses, and things like that in the book. Because alien artifacts doesn't necessarily have to be little weird chunks of metal. There's all kinds of different things that could fall under that classification. And Paul, one of the unusual things that we uncovered for this book is that throughout the years there has been all kinds of material that's been collected from areas of UFO activity and out of other strange circumstances. And with the exception of really a few cases, most of the material that has been discovered tends to be of terrestrial origin. And the idea is that if this was material that was coming from, say, like an interplanetary spacecraft, then I think it's the isotopic ratio within this material would be different than the material that was formed here on Earth or even our solar system. But the majority of these cases, this material tends to obviously have come from Earth, even though a lot of these cases, the circumstances surrounding the collection of this material tends to be extremely bizarre. There was one case in, I think it was, and you have to forgive me, Brazil, Venezuela, someplace like that, where a UFO was seen flying over a neighborhood, and it appeared to maybe be in trouble because it hovered, and then it seemed to spit out what seemed to be a stream of liquid metal, and that splattered all over the roofs and yards and even clothes that were hanging out to dry. Well, when this material was then collected, it was found to be tin, just regular old tin. They couldn't tell, where it had come from, but it was tin. That's all it was. Yet, obviously, it came from something that was in the sky due to the various locations that this, material was gathered from. So like I said, from on top of roofs, on the top of trees, situations like that. So I think that's one of the things that really make alien artifacts an interesting read is the wondering why, if we are dealing, when it comes to the UFO phenomena, with extraterrestrial spacecrafts, why is the material that is recovered from these types of unusual cases almost always of terrestrial origin? Now, we don't offer any, none of our books do we ever say, this is definitely what is happening. Don't listen to anybody else. We have the truth. Yeah, we don't, we don't have the truth. We don't know, but we're presenting all of this evidence to you to show you that it's weird and we're looking for explanations. We just don't know yet.
And Tim, you would think instead of tin, that maybe a liquid metal like mercury would be falling down from these UFOs. That's interesting that it was tin. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. There's another case in Minnesota that happened in the late '60s, where people saw an object hovering over a local reservoir close to the earthen dam that appeared to then crash into that area. Well, when the police went to this location, they actually found a still molten, bubbling hot mass of iron. That's what it was. It was molten iron in a big puddle. I mean, there was I can't remember. It was like a couple of 100 pounds worth of material. And like I said, it was still hot to the point that it was liquefied. And it took them a while for to be able to gather it till this material cooled off. But once again, the material was very terrestrial. I think iron with some impurities, maybe some slag still in it. But nobody could offer an explanation on how it was
No,
up in the air first and
nobody's
how
nobody's
it.
no.
I'm
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Nobody suggested that it could be a meteorite because I
Oh
mean
no,
meteorites have all sorts of metals in them.
right.
And I,
A meteorite has never been found in a molten state, and and you can tell also if it was meteoric iron,
yeah,
you can trace that back to space, and a lot of times, depending if anybody observed where it was seen to fall, they could trace it back to where in the solar system it originated from.
yeah. I
But
just
no,
wondered,
yeah.
like
Go
Paul's
ahead.
got his Egyptian background going, which made me think of it too. Like King Tut has a dagger on his tomb that was meteoric iron, I guess, or steel actually. Before the age of steel, it was steel, but it came from a meteorite. That's why I don't know. Just thought maybe. I mean, if it was in the air, it landed, it was liquid, and it was hot. Meteor sounds like the first guess anyway.
Yeah, well, and that was the first thing that everybody thought. This was a meteorite. But again, when meteorites are recovered, uh, uh, as soon as they've been found, say one comes down right in front of somebody, it's not hot. In fact, a lot of times they're cold. And I can't give you the scientific explanation of why that is, but like I suppose like the last 1,000 feet or so as it's coming down into the atmosphere after it burns, then it cools down rapidly. But no, I mean this mass was just I mean melted and remained hot for a number of hours afterwards. So and it was also checked for say like maybe it was a satellite, you know. Uh, but again, there it the material contained within had was nothing like any of the material at the time. You have to remember this would have been the middle to late 60s, I think 67. I'm just guessing. I don't have the book in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly what it was. Uh, you know, NASA and other countries, everyone knew what kind of materials were being used in these satellites, and this material was nothing like it. Now, it was the area that it came down, there were steel mills in the area, and somebody suggested that it may have been a hoax. But once again, who would have the facilities or the abilities to transport molten metal from a steel mill to a location like that, and for what reason? I mean, I suppose that anybody could have a good reason for
Yeah, but
doing a hoax like
to
that.
drop to drop it from the air, to take metal in that type of state, and even try to fly with something like that, nobody in there, right? You couldn't. I don't. I don't. I'm sure it's possible, but it's highly improbable and extremely dangerous. So who would take that chance? I mean, in an aluminum aircraft filled with fuel, let's take molten metal and try to like drop it. This is the
Right.
dumbest thing I've heard.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, and it's still a mystery. Nobody, I mean, after all these years, it's kind of been forgotten about. And we uncovered it from old newspaper accounts, and then was able to gather additional information from other sources, including witnesses who were there at the time who saw it. And the police were on the scene very quickly after it was seen. So I don't know, I mean that's just one of the mysteries that we have in alien artifacts, and again it mystifies me on why, if these are some kind of extraterrestrial craft, why the material recovered from them tends to have very mundane origins.
Well, they could be here. I mean, people have suggested that they've been. Sorry, Zanzine, that they've been here taking things from the planet. Whether it's
Water,
metals, materials, water, uh, livestock, you
gold.
know, DNA. I mean, I don't think they're here just for sightseeing tours. They're here for something. So the idea of them taking things from the planet isn't that surprising to me anyway. The idea of it falling in liquid state to the Earth is like, what is it? Is it a bomb? Were there military bases nearby? Was there anything like that that was any type of explanation or put forth as an explanation? Maybe.
Nope.
Wow.
About the only similarities was that it happened around a reservoir, and historically there have been a lot of UFO sightings around reservoirs and large bodies of water. That's about the only thing that that this situation has in common with previous UFO reports. And again, the area where it happened um, was more of a kind of like a city park type of area. No military bases around, airports or anything like that.
Yes, wait.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that makes you really wonder.
Yeah, well,
I agree too.
I mean, go ahead. I'm listening.
Go ahead. No, no, that's fine. That's fine.
No, no, no. I know it's hard to ask questions when you're in the car. So, uh,
Uh, I was thinking three things, but then Phil brought up, uh, you know, a lot of people do say, if it must be something special because, I mean, they can only stay in this planet so long, or at least the ones we know of that have visited us. And if some are living here and we don't know about it, that's something else. But the ones who seem
Hey,
and then leave, um, that's one thing. But then also interdimensional beings, they declassified stuff in the 50s about the interdimensional beings who said that these realms are like the Lakas and the Talas, like what you see in the Indian descriptions of dimension. They said you could think of it like that. So if we're stacked dimension wise, perhaps we still have some of the same elements and same things still in common, even though, it's a vibratorial thing. Because they said that some of these craft, it's not that they're coming from another planet, they're coming from another dimension. So the vibratory level matches are come. So perhaps materials stay the same. And then the other thing about what you said about these type of things happening, something molten lava like that in the sky. I mean, for things to happen like that, that's really expensive. So like you said, a hoax, you know, when you start seeing the same thing all the time and you can't say who did it, and there's definitely money would be spent if something like that was a hoax. So you should see a trail there. So it is mysterious. But back to what you're saying about how some of the materials could be the same. I've noticed that in a lot of crashes, and they say, "Oh, we want to test this, and we want to see," it may have one or two materials that are foreign, but basically they usually have the same composition of stuff that stuff we have. So I'm thinking that things just aren't that different throughout the universe. People always have an idea of something, with 20 arms and 15 eyes, when it could be two eyes and two arms just like us, and having to deal with the same issues. Not all the time, but so who knows?
yeah, you bring up a good point though. I've often wondered myself if the UFO phenomena,
bam.
if it is actually extraterrestrial, as we think of extraterrestrial, are we dealing with something that has been on the planet with us as long as we have been here? Maybe the origins millions of years ago may have been extraterrestrial, but now the Earth and maybe even the solar system is their home as well, um, and
Yeah.
they're observing us, or just living living here, trying to keep quiet and live their lives, as best as they can. So yeah, I mean, if that's the case, they would be using terrestrial source materials. It wouldn't.
Yeah, better than us, perhaps. But you just brought me to something else I wanted to ask you. I forgot. He said that you wrote a book or about Admiral Byrd. I want to, since you were on the show last time, um, you have given some of the best scientific like explanations of some things. Like we asked you, you are educated. We got some really good answers. So I want to ask you, what do you think about Admiral Byrd's story, the diary, if it was true, and also the thing of the 100 UFOs that Hitler was supposed to have sent that he never used again. He had the fake honeyboo phony UFO he had, but supposedly he had 100 craft that had a gravity pocket within a gravity pocket where the pilots wouldn't experience the G forces, and supposedly these plans were channeled by Maria Austin. So they were up to the V-12. So they obviously had V-1, V-2. So by the time they got to that, and Hitler got a hold supposedly of whatever research they were doing, I just heard one story that I haven't heard a lot, but that they used, I think on the second trip, they decimated a lot of what Admiral Byrd, his cargo and stuff, and they didn't talk about it much, but they said he had 100 craft, and why didn't he use more? Do you know anything about that?
Well, I'll start with Admiral Byrd, and you referred to his missing diary, which
Yes.
the missing diary of Admiral Byrd alleges that in 1947, he and a pilot traveled to fly over the North Pole, something that they had done previously, but he was repeating this. And at some point, they were accosted by UFOs that led them into the hollow earth through the Great Polar Opening. And when they were in this area, they were taken into a huge city where they met with the leaders, the masters, elders, as they were referred to,
Yeah.
who told Byrd that they had been observing the surface world for a million years, and at this point they were really concerned because of the recent development of the use of atomic weapons. And they
Yeah.
basically said that if we don't stop doing that, they were going to come topside and basically kick our asses. And then release Byrd and the pilot and let them come back to give the message. Well, in my research for a book that I wrote on this subject, um,
Yeah.
Admiral Byrd in 1947 actually was not at the North Pole. He was actually in Antarctica
Yeah.
participating in Operation High Jump, which in itself was kind of a mysterious operation because there was all kinds of suggestions on why it was taking place. One of the best ones was that they were training soldiers to be ready in case the Soviet Union attacked North America from the Arctic regions,
Oh
which
wow. Okay.
then, yeah, well, which then you have to ask, well, if that's the case, why did
Yeah.
you take all these soldiers and ships to Antarctica
Yeah, right.
when you could have just done it in Alaska or Greenland or even the Yukon? It would have been a lot easier and a lot cheaper. So I think that the missing diary of Admiral Byrd was actually disinformation that had been
It's
put,
okay. All right.
yeah, that had been put out to draw attention because the missing diary of Admiral Byrd probably came out around not too long after 1947. Right, it started out
Wow.
as what's called a samizdat, which is copies upon copies, usually done by Xerox, and then passed to various investigators before it was actually made into a privately published book.
Yes,
So
sir.
I think, yeah, you will see it. I think that whatever happened with Operation High Jump, whatever mysterious thing that they went down there actually looking for, which could have been that secret Nazi base that everybody
Right,
has talked about,
right.
because the Germans during World War II were definitely interested in Antarctica and had at least one and probably a number of secret expeditions there. Um, but whatever went on with Operation High Jump, it was supposed to take place over the entirety of the Antarctic summer, but they were
It
there
got
less
too
than a
late.
month.
Yeah, it got.
Yeah,
See, that's what I heard. That's where I heard that. That's where it got. I heard. I'm sure it's probably like you said, disinformation that they were engaged by 100 of these perfected craft. But you just clarified something for me. I always thought of two trips to Antarctica. I never thought about him flying over the North Pole up there. I always thought they were connected. Thanks for clearing that up. And I know a lot of people don't know that either.
right, right. Well, and there's all kinds of stories that came out that a bird supposedly saw like this ice-free land with
Yeah,
mammoths and other large prehistoric types of creatures. And again, I think that this was disinformation that was put out there to make the whole situation sound crazy, just in case whatever was really going on with Operation High Jump came out, and it would then be lumped in together with birds,
uh,
seeing flying saucers
yeah,
and mammoths and the Hollow Earth type of stuff. But again, we really don't know, and despite a lot of people saying, well, there's no way that Germany could have built a secret base in
yeah,
Antarctica. The British intelligence were convinced that Germany was up to something in Antarctica and had gone down there themselves in 1946, I think, in search of this base. And allegedly, it was British intelligence then who informed the United States that there's something weird going on there, and that you really need to
yeah,
spend some money and get some ships and personnel down there to see what's going on.
yeah. And
So
I like how you get a real side to everything. That's why, like, I think we're gonna have to another time. We're gonna have to ask you, like, on each, conspiracy or things like what you really thought. Like, I would be interested the way you explained that. I would be interested to see like what you thought about things when people always say, "Oh, Pluto talked about, Atlantis or Lemuria was off the coast of such and such." Things like that. Because the way you just, included like real time what it might be. Sounds like you might have some good explanations for those too, because people are mixing, the fact and fiction and embellishing, and who knows what's real.
well,
What do you
that's
think
just
about?
it. I mean, I've been researching this stuff for what, 30 more than 30 years. So I've had the benefit of seeing new information come out over the years that 20 years ago a conspiracy theory may sound, oh yeah, this may sound plausible, but then as the years go by you realize that it's just more more bull.
Yeah,
I won't
You
have
know,
to.
one thing with Admiral Byrd, he is definitely a legend. And even if the story is not factual and it's fiction, I kind of like who cares because he is a legend. I mean, the story is fascinating. And I remember as a little kid, I I was really admiring Admiral Byrd. I said, I want to be like somebody like him. I want to be this explorer. So yeah, he's a very fascinating character. You also, too, you wrote a book about Jeff the Talking Mongoose. And as
that
a
was
little boy, I used to read stories about that, and I'm going, what? A mongoose who can actually speak English. Can you tell us about that book?
Yeah, yeah, it's a weird story, and I'm like you, Paul. I mean, I read about this case um, in various publications when I was a kid, and it fascinated yet terrified me, because it obviously was more than just uh, a mongoose who had either somehow learned to talk or was parroting words, back, that sort of thing. There's definitely supernatural elements at play in this case. And I should say that there was a movie released last year, called Nandor Forder and the Talking Mongoose, which was a fictionalized version of the great psychic investigator Nandor Forder and his investigation, into this case. But like I said, the movie is very fictionalized, and you can't watch this movie and think that, yeah, this is what was actually going on, because the case of Jeff the Talking Mongoose is just far more strange and and convoluted as well. I mean, we would have to dedicate the entire show to this case. But roughly in the early 1930s, there was a family who lived on the Isle of Man, that they had been at this farm for a few years. It consisted of a man and a wife, the Irving family, and then their teenage daughter. Now, the Irvings were an older couple, and they already had two adult children who had families of their own and living in England. In fact, they all were originated in England and then moved to the island to start this farm. Well, the farmhouse that they moved into was an older building that Mr. Irving renovated and put. It was a stone building, and he put wooden wall paneling on the entire inside to try to help insulate. The Isle of Man, it's cold in the winter times. Even in the summer times, it was cold. And at one point, he saw an odd creature out in the yard with the animals. He said it looked somewhat like a big weasel, and he tried to trap it because he was afraid that it would get at the chickens, but he was never able to do so. And after a while, it seemed to have moved inside the house because they could hear like animal noises and something running around in between the walls, and making noises. One time, Mr. Irving barked at it like a dog, I think, to try to scare it away, and it barked back. So then he meowed at it like a cat, and it meowed back. And that's how it started. After a while, it started repeating phrases that they would say back to them from behind this wall. And they said that the voice was very high pitched. And then after a while, it actually had started having conversations with them. And this was obviously a very intelligent entity,
Mongoose,
creature,
yeah.
whatever you want to call it.
Well-
And speculation has been wild throughout the years on just exactly what this thing is. And it always said that it was a mongoose, that it was over 100 years old, and that it had been born in India and then was brought over with some other mongoose by a farmer to help quail the rabbit population on the island. At that point, rabbits were breeding rapidly, and they needed something to help kill them off. But Jeff said that he never learned to talk until Mr. Irving took the time to teach him to talk. But then once he started talking, you couldn't shut him up, they said. And not only did he have a growing vocabulary, but he would sing, he would curse. He had what seemed to be almost like poltergeist type of abilities. Just weird things like that. So naturally, it was assumed that it was a hoax, that the Irvings were somehow, pulling this off. But there were a number of witnesses, people in the community, and then investigators who came over from England to see what was going on and would hear Jeff, and actually had other things happen to them. Like at times, if Jeff didn't like someone, it would squirt streams of water from holes in the wall at them, like a little hose. Sometimes it was water, sometimes it was urine. If he really didn't like you, he'd pee on you. Yeah. Other times he would throw things like a poltergeist, from these areas of the wall, and later it was thought that the daughter, whose name was Vori, was somehow a ventriloquist, like this master ventriloquist, and was pulling this all off.
Is this supposed to
And
be
that,
real?
go ahead.
No, Tim, is this supposed to be real? As I
Yes.
listen to
Oh
you.
yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
yes, yep. It
Wow.
was it was in all the newspapers at the time, all over the world. The spook of Cashin's Gap. Cashin's Gap was the name of that particular area where the house was located,
Yeah.
and but the thing about Vori being a ventriloquist is that at that time people still thought that ventriloquists were able to actually throw their voice rather than being misdirection like we know it is today. And years later, after Vori was an adult and had moved away, a reporter from 40 and not 40 and Times, Fate magazine, actually was able to track her down and convince her to let him interview her about the case. And after all these years, she still said that yes, it was real, that this actually happened, and that it ruined her life. She said that she was. I'm laughing at Phil's
No, no.
the mysterious tail in the camera. It's
I mean, it could have, because clone. They talk about animals that've been cloned like 7 generations, that they're like they can talk and think and all that. Maybe it was a clone. Who knows?
possibly. I mean, if it wasn't clone, it would have had to have been a natural clone because there's
Yeah,
nobody. Yeah, this was like 19 what? I think it started in 1932.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, there was no, and this location was extremely rural. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have a telephone. They they gosh, I'm trying to think. They even though that at other locations on the island had electricity and telephones and stuff, they were so far out in the sticks and
Okay.
up in the wilds that none of that was able to be brought to them. But again, like I said, once Vori was an adult, she said that Jeff ruined her life. That she was always afraid that if anybody found out that she was the spook girl of the of man, that nobody would marry her. She never got married because, again, she was afraid that if anybody found out who she actually was, that would be the ruin of any relationship that she would have. She lived on her own. And she admitted, she said, look, if I was that good of a ventriloquist to be able to pull this off and fool hundreds of people over the years, because this was the case that went on up until the beginning of World War II in England, not in the United States, but in England. When she left, she was old enough then to move to England and start working at the wartime factories. But she said, if I was that good of a ventriloquist, I wouldn't have been working in factories. I would have had a stage career. I would have been in movies and things like that. She said, no, it was real. She said, we don't know what he was, whether or not he was an actual animal, if he was a ghost, even though Jeff admitted that he wasn't a ghost. In fact, he was afraid of ghosts, he would tell people. So I don't know, it's such a wonderful story that, and there hasn't been another one like it ever. That's what makes Jeff the Talking Mongoose such a unique story.
And Tim, when you were coming out with that book and you told me about it, what blew me away is like a couple years back, I had that one case of where this family was saying they encountered a talking squirrel
Mm-hmm.
and they thought it was possessed and was demonic and stuff. Zandine, I don't think you were on that case. And I was thinking in my head, I said, these people must know about Jeff the Talking Mongoose. I mean, we did a real thorough investigation and we came up with nothing. Um, and then they said that the squirrel just took off and never came back. I be honest with you, I didn't really believe their story, but I think what happened was that they read some article, probably in a 14 book about Jeff the Talking Mongoose, and I just went ahead and recorded their story. And I had that story. And when you told me you're publishing a book on Jeff the Talking Mongoose, I said, wow, because I got a story that will fit your book. And there it is.
Yeah, I looked for other similar stories to put in the book, and yeah, I did run across one after the book was published that I actually included in the hardcover version of the book that took place in Scotland around the same time. Where again, it was very similar circumstances. It was grandparents who were caring for a grandchild who was a girl who was about 10 years old, and supposedly there was some kind of um, talking animal. It was never quite specified just exactly what this animal was that was involved in. Again, it was almost like a haunting type of situation. But that one, that story petered out fairly quickly, and nothing else was ever written about it, which is really frustrating to me. But I did include it, in the book along with a photograph that I found from a local newspaper of the grandparents and this girl. But that's the only thing that has even come close, with the exception of, like some poltergeist cases where after a while it develops a voice and starts to talk. But none of them have ever claimed to be a talking mongoose or any other kind of animal. The case of Jeff the Talking Mongoose is unique.
Tim, do you remember this book?
Oh yeah, I can tell from the cover right away with that scene trailer.
Uh, oh, and Tim, before we talk about this book, um, also too, all the notes that the late Timothy Beckley wrote, um, are all those notes are already in books now, or are you still have notes to go fall back on?
Notes. What do you mean by notes? You mean like
Like his notes for his future books, and then
oh
he passed away, and
yeah, those everything with the exception of um, he had suggested to me that maybe the next book that do would be about subterranean mysteries, something that was always a favorite subject of his. In fact, one of his very first book was about the Shaver mystery and
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
the reality of the inner earth. So he was wanting to do something along those lines, and he sent me a few odds and ends of possible material that we could use. But then he passed away, and I've kind of sat on that for a little while because that is something that has been done quite a bit by us. Well, the Dulce Warriors uh, really is kind of an underground mystery book. in its purest sense, since it involves an underground base and aliens and weird things like that. So I don't know. I mean, maybe eventually we may try to do something with that. We had a couple of years ago, we did a book about underground UFO bases around the planet. So, I don't want to just go and just be constantly repeating stuff that Beckley's Interlight Publications had done. I mean, where's the fun, where's the fun in that? I want us to do new and interesting things and inform people about what a weird and wonderful world we live in.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, it's just amazing. Just like the late Brad Steiger, his family are going through his notes and stuff and publishing books that are based on Brad Steiger's notes, which is so cool because it keeps his legacy going and is making Brad Steiger and Timothy Beckley immortal. Even though they're not with us, but they're immortal, their words are still out there.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, and Tim's great niece and other members of his family are still looking into maybe trying to publish more material under I think they were talking about maybe turning global communications into like Timothy Green Beckley publication, something along those lines. And I told him if they ever decide to do that, we'd be more than happy to to help out with it. Because Tim put out a lot of books that in the days before um, publishing on demand, that he would have like a limited press run. Um, First of all, because it was expensive, and you just never knew what books were going to be popular and which books were just going to fall between the cracks. So I imagine that there are a lot of his books that fell between the cracks that really do deserve to be given new life. But again, I'm going to leave that to his surviving relatives to decide to do that. I don't want to step on anybody's, toes. If they come to me and said, here's some books that we would like to maybe republish, but we don't know how to do it, then by all means, I'll get everybody together, yourself included, Paul, and we'll whip those back out for a new generation to
Yeah,
to discover these amazing works.
yeah, absolutely, Tim. Absolutely. And I see that you were in a lot of Tim Beckley's books, like this one.
Yep, yep, yep.
And oh, and this one was, look how thick this one is.
Okay. Oh
Uh,
yeah, that was Tim's last book. That
this is, yeah, his last book.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he put that one out while he was alive, and that was yeah. When he put that out, the whole Black Lives Matter movement was going on, and boy, I tell you, I mean, I was like, boy, I don't know if you should call it Gray Lives Matter or Alien Lives Matter.
Yeah, alien lives matter.
Alien Lives Matter, I said that may ruffle a bunch of feathers, but Tim was certain. He says, "No, I think people will appreciate that," and he was right. It ended up being a very popular book. One of the reasons because he looked into, and this was something he had always been interested in, but nobody else had ever really written about it, was the whole African American involvement in the UFO phenomena through the years.
Like
This was
Betty and
something.
Barney Hill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and there are all kinds of investigators and cases that involved African Americans that, and who knows why. I mean, I'm sure there are some reasons that we won't talk about in this show, but really just never really saw the light of day. And Tim felt that these were people that deserved to be known, to for
Like
people
Tim.
to, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Well,
he's right.
and Betty and Barney Hill, an interracial couple from Canada, they had that UFO encounter in which they were abducted. And then all of a sudden, everybody who's ever been abducted is finally speaking out because of Betty and Barney Hill. So it was very important that that story went out to the public and and take your during that time when people were you know racially
Yeah,
negative
sure.
about things, they finally accepted this idea. Oh my God, okay, they are experiencing something I experienced, and they were respected for telling their story. So yeah, it's really good.
Yep,
Tim,
yeah.
just from these broaching these subject matters that once it becomes like on a cosmic level, I mean, anybody that's associated on that level with it, it's not a black and white thing. It's not anything. I mean, people have 10 eye, you might think the aliens have 10 arms and, whatever. And it becomes definitely closer. Like Reagan, I think he alluded to everybody talked about, if there was an alien, civilization, we probably find that we have more things in common. Then with that, we probably unite. But we don't even have to wait for that. I wonder if you're also familiar with some of the. They always talk about the gray aliens, but they talk about these black aliens. I mean, literally black with the red eyes. They scare the shit out of people, but they turn out to be really nice and highly intelligent. But then it's a black thing. Like, they had. I read a story where this lady and her husband they were in a wood setting, and it was like maybe 7 or 8 of these black beings. They look like tall black grays. Like they look pretty much the same with the big eyes, but their eyes are red. And the lady instantly she thought because of the red in the eye, it scared her. But one came up on her and said, don't be afraid. And the husband wasn't he hadn't got contact at the same time she did, so he feared for her life. But then one came to him as well. And their story, they said at first they were like scared shitless, but they found that these were like they're really gentle and smart. But I've heard that a couple times about them. And then Norman Bergeron, the scientist for NASA, he worked there for like what 40 years or whatever, and he talked about the black aliens that landed at the Alameda Naval Air Force Base. I don't know if you're familiar with that story. He was interviewed, and they said, and the lady asked him, she says, "Well, you mean black, like black people?" He says, "No, black, like I mean like black." And yeah, he said and he said he waved. They were, but and one more thing about that. I was working at the Emporiums like in I think like the 90s, and there was a gentleman that would come in there. He always had like a space, like naval hat on, and he said that he was involved with some space program, and he said that there was some people that went up on a mission, and they saw 7 foot, like 300, 400 pound black guys with white dreads waving. And because they said something, they thought they were crazy. They aborted the mission, sent them home. It was a far out story, but it was pretty interesting. He talked about he saw, but it sounded like the same guys that were at the naval the naval Alameda naval base from the story he was telling me. But anyway, have you heard anything about any black aliens?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't hear the one about the ones with the dreadlocks. That's a new one to me. I'll have to look to see if I can find any about that. But yeah, I mean, throughout time, these things have appeared to people in all kinds of different shapes, sizes, and colors.
Right.
You know, Anymore people tend to associate the stereotypical alien as the little grays, with the big eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
But as you mentioned, there have been hundreds of different types that have been seen over the years, including, like you said, the tall blacks. And again, we have to emphasize not African American black, but
Yeah,
black. Though there have been reports of people seeing. And you've heard of like the tall whites, like
right.
the
The
the,
Charles,
the, the
yeah, Charles,
tall,
yeah.
Nordics or the
yeah, they
Nordics.
like the Nordics. There have also been reports of tall, what appears to be black, African types
Yeah, I heard
of
about a cigar
creatures.
ship landing down, and they said a bunch of brothers got out. They were spit shine. They said they did it. They said they were armed, but they weren't hostile. They came out, spit shine. They had these uniforms really tall. Some brothers from a cigar ship they were talking about. That was just one story, but
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
George
Well,
And
Clinton?
even like Whitley Strieber, who wrote the Communion,
yeah,
he saw when he was abducted short, dark blue aliens. So I mean, yeah, just
yeah.
like Tim
yeah,
was saying,
interesting.
there's all types.
But those
Black,
Zimbabwe
dark
children,
blue.
yeah, those children that saw the aliens in Zimbabwe, the at the school, you know that one, Tim.
Right.
With Don Mack, and they had several incidents like that, but two of them, the kids said they saw a black one and a white one, but like all black, and one was moving really fast, and one was almost moving slow motion. That was weird too. But they said the black one was hovering around the craft, and the white one, or I guess it's more like silver, came and was talking to them about the earth and different things. But it was two of them, two different ones, black and I guess white one.
Yeah. The interesting case about the Zimbabwe case is that what maybe about 5 years ago, I think it was James Fox who made a documentary about that case, uh, included that case in a larger documentary, and interviewed those children who are now adults.
One is my friend,
And
Emily Trim. One is my friend right now. She's on Instagram. Her name is Emily Trim. Yeah.
yes,
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. Well, and they stick to their story. I mean, they have the perfect opportunity to say, now, we just made it up. We're just kids,
Yeah.
screwing around. No, all of them say that no, this actually happened,
Yeah.
and some of them have gone, further to say, well, here's some stuff we didn't talk about, because we were either afraid to talk about it or we were
Yeah.
told not to talk about it. And your friend is somebody like that who
Yeah.
was
If you get a chance,
given messages.
check out Instagram, Emily Trim. She has a lot of her writings up there, but you can tell there's some kind of other energy going on. There's alien, the inscriptions and stuff. It's not from here. I don't know. It's pretty deep. And when you consider what she's been through, because she was one of the girls actually talking, on in the documentary. But now she's a full, grown woman, and she's a really good artist. But when I talk to her, it's like the stuff that's going on, and she's on some deep stuff. Something happened.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I mean, the majority of these cases, I'm convinced something happened. Now, the explanations elude us uh, for whatever reasons, but I think that most of the time you really have to trust the sources, these people who have had these strange experiences, and listen to what they are saying. They may not have any other idea themselves, on what happened to them. They just know that something bizarre happened to them.
Yeah. And and now, Zendian, are you talking about that one case? And I think it was in South Africa where a bunch of school children saw that UFO land out in the field.
It,
Is that
yep,
the case you're talking
Yeah,
about?
there were like two or three of them, but we're referencing the Zimbabwe one. Yeah, South
yeah,
Africa. Yeah.
that's the
Yeah,
one.
that
Yeah,
is amazing. I mean, you're talking about if it was a murder case, they would have been found guilty. I mean, you got multiple witnesses. All those school children and teachers are not going to make up a story like that, that a freaking UFO landed out in the field, left some impression marks. They saw the aliens. Yeah, I totally believe them. You, you can't get all those people telling the same lie.
If you look at Emily Trim's artwork, I mean, like I said, there's some like it's alien hieroglyphics or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there may be one man now who was part of this original group when they were kids who is saying that no, it's not true that we just made it all up.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that seems to be that seems to happen often when it comes to these kind of group sightings, where years later the majority of the group, are still saying, yeah, it happened, and there'll be one person who'll say, no, it didn't. So you have to wonder what's going on with that person, whether or not they have convinced themselves that
Yeah,
it didn't happen.
yeah.
Uh, because you do see that a lot, with individuals who have weird experiences that they don't know how to explain it, and they're, I think, deep down afraid that they're going crazy, and so they'll just deny it. They'll try to forget it, and if anybody asks them, they'll be like, no, nothing happened, that sort of thing.
I think it goes back to the book that you were saying, the Alien Lives Matter, and Paul, mentioned that the hills, were respected. They weren't. Not. I mean, now they might be, but when they first came out, they were not respected, and they were the fact that they were an interracial couple was a reason for a lot of people to disbelieve them and discard their story altogether. And I believe the same thing happened with the story in Zimbabwe, is the fact that if that had happened in New York or Los Angeles or even down here in Florida, where all sorts of crazy things happen, it would be probably believed by more people. But the fact that it happened in a country like Zimbabwe leads a lot of people to write it off and say, oh, well, you can't trust anything that comes from over there.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Phil, you're correct. Yeah, when they first put out the story, and I should have clarified that when they first put out the story, people were throwing stones at them, but now in
Now,
present time, people are sitting there going, "Hey, they're telling the truth. I mean, this happened to me, or it happened to my neighbor, whatever."
Yeah. But the people who knew the hills, because Betty was a social worker, and I think Marty worked at the post office, and the people who knew them, mm, they had nothing but glowing things to say about them. Great people. We loved them, and naturally at that time in the '60s. As you said, Phil, I mean, because they were an interracial couple, uh, they were just instantly, I think,
written off.
well, I mean, written off is a polite way of saying the horrible things that were
Yeah.
actually said about them. It's just, just terrible. I mean, and even where they lived, I mean, they lived up in the Upper East Coast, where supposedly more liberal viewpoints uh, uh, towards interracial couples. That wasn't the case for them. Boy, I mean, they just got torn up, not figuratively.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm 51 years old, but I still remember that being a big deal. My second wife was African American, is still African American, but I remember having uncles saying, don't bring her home for Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And that was the early '90s. So I mean, it's yeah, the '60s. Oh my,
My kid is half Italian, so
right on.
Yep.
But no, too, now you bring up a lot of good points. I mean, but Betty and Barney Hill, um, I researched another story where they brought them to link up with this lady from South Carolina. I believe she was like mulatto, but she was a Bible thumper, and she hadn't had much education, but they were asking her a lot of questions about aliens and stuff, and they believed she was channeled through. So when they introduced those two together, the lady and Betty and Barney Hill, she said that she told them to get out of here. She said, "You guys are part of the bad ones. I'm with the good ones. Get them out of here." And so they didn't really get to have a full meeting. The CIA, they had to take Betty and Barney Hill out of her house. I think I gotta find her name, but yeah, that was pretty interesting though, because she said that the Greys that they talked to were the bad ones.
Well, at the time, the description that Betty provided of these creatures weren't really like we think of the traditional Greys. You know, you look at some of the sketches that were provided. Well, and in fact, Barney, in his not hypnotic state, but he remembers being as awake when he first observed the creatures in the craft as it was hovering overhead through his binoculars. He said that they looked like Nazis. He said that they were wearing like black uniforms and black hats and like very white skin, and he thought they were Nazis. You know, that was his
Wow.
impression, you know,
That's
of these
terrifying.
things. Yeah, yeah.
That's
But not,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. But you know, the whole gray alien thing is really a very recent type of phenomena. You know, it can be traced back a little bit before Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I think it was that movie that first introduced publicly the idea that the aliens would could look like that. And then after Whitley Strieber's book Communion, with that cover came out, then you know it took over. It became the stereotypical alien, and any other types of reports of beings that looked any different from that for a long time were ignored, you know, because everybody was so fixated on the big-eyed alien, big-eyed grays, you know. Yes.
They don't want to hear that it's not big-eyed Greys, huh? Yeah.
Exactly. Well, there was one UFO group. I can't remember. It wasn't MUFON, but it was one of the major ones in the late 1980s. Said that they were only going to accept reports of aliens only if they involved the big-eyed grays. Anything else they were going to toss out because you know they were convinced that it was only the big-eyed grays were the true aliens. Everything else must be hoaxes. And it's just like it's very you know, very short-sighted considering the decades of other cases that involved creatures that looked completely different than the big-eyed grays. But nope, nope, big-eyed grays, that's it.
You know, and the Hopkinsville encounter, the aliens were actually green.
Possibly. They
Yeah.
glowed. They glowed in the dark. So I mean, you know, they reported of looking green, but we don't know what they may have actually looked like in the daytime.
Yeah.
But again, you know, a circumstance where you know, like you got short creatures, child size, but these things had big eyes and big ears. You know, almost like elephant types of ears with long arms that ended in claws. So
Well, that's what
that's a case that is somewhat unique. I'm sorry, say that again.
they said that about those creatures in Las Vegas. Sounds similar. The ones where the police saw the craft, in the sky and on door cam, and they came there and said it was aliens in the backyard.
That was like a year ago or two, right? That was pretty recent.
You're right. Yeah.
It was
Those
about a year
things are
ago.
supposed to be tall, though. Yeah,
Yeah.
they
That's
weren't. They
right.
weren't supposed to be. They weren't short. They were tall creatures supposedly. Yeah, that's a strange case that you know nobody has still been able to you know figure out one way or the other whether or not the family is just you know hoaxing it for whatever reason. But you know you've
Yeah.
seen the police you know their uniform cams when they went to investigate, and the family you know either they're really good actors or they're really scared. You know,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
definitely were freaked out. Yeah.
yeah. They seem freaked out, huh? Which modern day story do you are you wrestling with, or you think is true?
Oh my gosh. Oh, gee. Yeah, what you mean like with UFOs and stuff?
Yeah, and alien sightings or encounters. Yeah.
Um, there's one case, and gosh, you put me on the line now, and I can't remember the names. But there was one case, and this was a case that Tim Beckley loved this case because he actually got to know the guy who witnessed this, and then his wife later on after he had passed away. But he was an elk hunter, and he was out elk hunting one day, and came across a landed UFO with a creature outside of it, and it actually took his gun away from him, and I guess it like um, bent the shaft, and then abducted him and put him inside the ship. He said that they actually had to be shrunk down to fit inside of this ship, and then they were taken off planet to this creature's planet, and
Wow.
I'm giving a like a very condensed version of it.
Yeah.
But when he got back, when they let him go back at the location where um, he was originally taken from, he found that his truck had been taken off the road and was now like almost buried to the tops of his wheels in the muck at the side of the road. And he actually then had to, because he was pretty sick from
Yeah.
what had happened, and he had to basically like stagger back to civilization to get help. And he was messed up for quite a while. Nobody could quite figure out what was going on with him. Suspicions of maybe like radiation poisoning and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But he had proof uh, because, like I said, his rifle was messed up, and then a bullet was found at the scene that was it looked like that it had been shot up against like something really hard because it was flattened.
Okay.
So I
Wow.
mean, that, and I'm sorry, Hickson. I
Fascinating.
think the guy's last name was Hickson, but
Shrunk him
but
to get into the ship. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah, and in fact, had also took some elk with him as well because he was just getting ready to. In fact, I think he actually did shoot at one, and that's when this being appeared. And then the bullet, he said, it looked like that the bullet was deflected off of like a force field, and he wasn't able to get the elk that he wanted. But he said that when he was on this ship being taken away, there was also several elk on board as well that had been taken with him.
Wow.
Yeah,
And,
it's a bizarre case.
Tim, did you say he was shrunk and went into
Yes.
the UFO?
Yeah, yeah. The UFO, while not tiny, it was smaller, like smaller than a car, and the opening was way too small for them to, physically get into. But he said that all of a sudden they were inside this ship, and he couldn't figure out how they got inside of this ship when it was so small, and the only thing that he could figure out was that somehow they had been shrunk to fit inside of it. Yeah,
That's
who knows? It
amazing.
could have been like a TARDIS, where the inside is bigger than the outside.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing.
We don't want to shrink. We don't want to shrink certain things, though, right?
Hey, one thing is, like in Doctor Who walks into a telephone booth, and then when he's inside, it's vast, it's huge. And some UFO abductees have actually said that the UFO was small, but they managed to get inside the UFO and it was huge inside. Yeah, the dimensions are all wacky.
Yeah, I think that we included that in the Weird Time book, uh, because there was one very recent whistleblower that had told, I guess, Congress that a UFO that had been captured um, when people would go inside of it. The interior was much bigger than the outside, like a TARDIS, and that there was weird time dilation effects that you would go in and maybe seem like that you were just in there a couple of minutes, but then when you would come out, hours had passed.
Yeah.
But again, that's not an uncommon situation with certain UFO cases.
Maybe they're not ships at all. Maybe they're just like interdimensional portals.
Yeah.
Walk through and you're somewhere else, literally.
I talked to Travis Walton one time, um, and they came out with that movie. What was it? You guys remember the name of the movie about Travis Walton?
Fire in the Sky.
Yeah, Fire in the Sky. Yeah, and when I talked to Travis, yeah, he kind of thought you like entered another dimension when he went into the UFO. So yeah.
That day when you talk that day that Travis Walton got abducted, right around October, that same day was the one of the most prolific days of humanoid visitations. So he was part of that wave that happened down in that area. I think it was like 74, October 17th to 23rd or something.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, Zandy, you're correct though. Yeah, it was like a wave of things going on.
Yeah, 1973 and 1974, there definitely was a UFO flap taking place over the United States. The whole, the Pascagoula incident took place in October of '73. So yeah, there was a bunch of stuff going on then.
And in 1973 and in 1974, I was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and during the early 70s, there was a UFO flap on the East Coast military bases. And that's when in 1977, you had the Fort Benning, Georgia incident in which some UFOs had a skirmish with military personnel. So, and that was called Incident at Fort Benning. And I can't think of the author right now, but um, I there was a interview with the author, and then I told my story about 1974, how UFOs, and when I was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, I actually, with two other soldiers, did see 6 UFOs in V formation flying up in the sky. They were blue discs, and one of the soldiers looks at me. He goes, "Geese?" I go, "What are you talking about, geese? They're glowing blue. Those are freaking UFOs." So we made our little report and everything else. So yeah, there was a big flap during that time.
The blue one last night, which I should have sent to you guys. It's actually about 5:30 this morning. A blue one.
Yeah, Phil, we'll have to next. Yeah, another time we have to put one of your videos up.
Paul, you got spoiled though, because when you saw that, when the ones you saw, they darted and they moved. So when you see ones that like look like a satellite, man, you're totally turned off. Well, man, if that's the serial, if that's not the serial flight, you're like.
Well, I was looking at Coast to Coast AM. I was looking at Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. It was about maybe 4 months ago, and they had a video footage from Elk Grove of what this guy thought were UFOs. And I see them every freaking night, and they're not UFOs. They're doing night training, and they're conventional aircraft. And I saw that on George Norrie's Coast to Coast, and he's saying, "Are these UFOs in Elk Grove, California?" No, dang it. They're conventional aircraft. I've seen them. I see them every night. When I walk my dogs at nighttime, there they are. So it's amazing. Hey, Tim, can you tell us where we can get some of your books?
Oh, sure. Well, probably the easiest way would be to go to Amazon.com and just type in my name, Tim R. Swartz, and they'll all come tumbling out for your reading pleasure, both print and ebooks. Some of them you can find at your favorite local bookstores or library, and I always encourage everyone to patronize both. But Amazon, I mean, if you're looking for that immediate gratification, that's probably the best way to do it. And if you're wanting to find out more about our most recent book, which is called Weird Time, Exploring the Mysteries of Time and Space, we have a website for it called weirdtimebook.com. I'll say that again, weirdtimebook.com.
And Tim, I gotta tell you, um, this one lady on my Facebook, she was like, "Well, how can I get some of your books?" I said, "Well, just type in my name, Paul Dale Roberts Books, and you'll see them." And and then she wrote me back. She goes, "Do you also go by Tim R. Short?" I go, "Oh my God." Because, and then I ran to go see what she was talking about. So I put Paul Dale Roberts Books, and sure enough, your books popped up.
Yeah, baby, those are my books too. Yeah, they're mine. Don't worry about it. Tim,
Yeah, I'm Tim. I'm Tim R.
That's right. That's right.
Oh my
Well, I still have people today ask me if I'm Commander X. You know,
Yeah, who
uh,
was Commander X? Who was Commander X?
I have no idea. Some people suspect it might have been the late Jim Keith. But I don't know. I mean, he still continued to do some material for Beckley after Jim Keith had passed away. So I'm not sure. I mean, Beckley never offered a name, and I didn't ask. I mean, it's professional secrets, and I'll keep that. I mean, I won't ask. But he definitely was a separate person because our original email account that we put together for global communications was commander x at hotmail.com, and it was kind of a way that all of the writers for Beckley could communicate back and forth, and then if anybody wanted to send an email to any of the writers, they would just have to go. They would just use that email account, and it would get to the right person.
Tim, everybody has a variant, separate personality. Like Zandine Smith, he's actually Paranormal Soul Brother. And Phil over here is Al Guapo. And me, I'm the Demon Warrior. So, yeah, there's all these variants. And so I think Commander X is a variant of somebody that we probably know in our circle or whatever.
Could be,
Tim, I have to send
or new.
Tim, I have to send you some episodes. It's just James Brown doing Ghostbusting is basically what it is. But yeah,
I want to see that. Yeah.
yeah. Like it's I was really enjoying talking to you, getting some different takes on some of these conspiracies. I really thought that was really good in the show. And also, I think, man, somebody could do a good movie, a series, a documentary where they say it's no money in documentaries, but about you and Tim Beckley and like some of the other cases he took on, some of the black investigators, things that he did that other people didn't. That sounds like a really great story to me. I like really enjoyed hearing about that, man.
Yeah, I agree. Somebody should do a documentary, about Tim Beckley because he had a fascinating life and just all kinds of fascinating stories. If I was younger, I would probably try to have tackle something like that. But yeah, I'm old and tired now, so I'll leave it to somebody younger who has the energy.
And it would be kind of interesting to have Tim Beckley and Brad Steiger, who are both deceased, in this documentary, and they both were connected. So that, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and there's so many people now who attribute their interest to all of this, especially to Tim Beckley and Brad Steiger and John Keel. Those are the three names that you hear brought up all the time. with everyone. It would surprise me if somebody who is in the field now would confess that they'd never heard of any of those people. I'd be like, oh wow, you know, because they were such a major influence on me and a lot of other people as well.
Oh yeah, Tim, and that's very correct because some of my new ghost hunting friends, they go, "Oh, Paul, do you get your inspiration from this TV show, Ghost Hunters or whatever?" I go, "Hell no, hell no." I said I get my inspiration, and which is true, from Brad Steiger. And then they go, "Who's Brad Steiger?" Oh my God, Brad Steiger's a freaking legend, you know.
Art
And
Phillips, something, man.
yeah, and Timothy
It's like,
Beckley is a legend. So
right,
yeah,
yeah. You just want to tell these people, read a book.
yeah,
You
exactly.
know,
Yeah.
turn the screens down and read a book. And I have to admit, I mean, I have a lot of screen time as well, but I also still read a lot of books.
Yeah, and they idolize these young ghost hunters. Supposedly, I'm getting my knowledge from them. No, hell no. So
Yeah.
that really frustrates me when I hear that.
It's more like the other way around, I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if I'm going to get inspiration, I'm going to get it from Tim Shorts. I'm going to get it from Tim Beckley, Brad Steiger. That's who I'm going to get inspired by.
This is a question for all three of you gentlemen. Like, all you guys are prolific, you get into your work. I want to know, as far as books and documentaries, when did you guys first get into your best workflow where you could just do these type of things? You didn't have to, call this person or research that. Like, you were comfortable with your process and like coming out with a book or documentary, because you guys all do that. When did you first get comfortable, like, where it was like, production?
Well, Phil did a really nice documentary, which was on PBS for a whole year. And so I'm going to let Phil take over right now.
Um, my first chance to do a documentary came with a script writing contest that Sacramento had for the Sacramento Film Festival. I was one of 10 people selected to turn my script into a documentary, and it was the first documentary ever selected for that film festival, which had been running for I think like 15 or 16 years at that point. So that gave me 3 months to create a 10-minute documentary, which was my first time really digging into it. Um, but I learned how to make a documentary by watching thousands of documentaries. I'm a documentary addict. When I watch documentary on anything from like, I'm not joking, basket weaving, corn grinding, boat making, you name it, I will watch a documentary on just on picking your nose. It just, to me, I'm fascinated with the medium, and the giants of it like Errol Morris have always been the guys that I've watched. So I learned from watching, and then with computers and everybody being able to buy software, and I was able to teach myself editing, and took a few camera classes, and just did it. The easiest way to learn something is just to go out and do it, and you'll make a lot of mistakes the first time, but eventually you'll get better.
And as for me, when I was working at California Department of Fish and Wildlife, my my job kept me so freaking busy, and I would get phone calls at work, which would be some producer down in LA. Hey, can you fly down to LA and do this documentary? Well, I did a few. Some I had to turn down because of my job. Now that I'm retired, I have all the time in the world, which is great. Now I can do this podcast. I, I was asked to be a podcaster a long time ago, but when I was working, I didn't have the time for it. Now I do. So I make it a point, doing the podcast, I make it a point once a week to put out an article. I gather these articles and I put out a book. My books are not as detailed like Tim's. Mine are all over the place, like investigations, something I researched on. So it's multiple subjects, but it has to do with the paranormal. So I make it a point, one article a week, work on that book, do the podcast, and if I get any kind of phone call, go for it. Tim, you?
Well, I mean, I started writing material, magazine articles when I was in college to help pay for just like incidentals. There at that time, this would have been starting around 1977. There was still a lot of UFO and even some cryptid magazines that were being put out at the time. So I was started writing articles at that point. But then once I got into my full-time job in television at various television stations, I just really didn't have time. I would still do investigations and kept files and notes, but I really didn't write anything. And when I worked at the big PBS station in Indianapolis, we did a lot of documentaries, and I mean, these were documentaries that were, there were a number of people working on them. I mean, producers and directors and photographers and writers and things like that. So I mean, it was always a group effort. And very proud, by the way, of the documentaries that we put together for that station. None of them have had anything to do, with the paranormal, but they still, were just a lot of fun and great learning experiences. But it wasn't really until the probably the early 1990s that I started getting back into the writing, mostly because of computers and word processing. Before that, it was electric typewriters, and I hated electric typewriters, even though I was a very fast typist. Uh, uh, I would still make mistakes and just hated having to use the whiteout and
Oh my
stuff like that. So once word processing came about, that just inspired me just to start writing again, and again tried to start writing for magazines. But at that point, magazines, um, especially about UFOs and psychic phenomena and stuff like that, with the exception of, like, say, Fate magazine and 40 and Times, and the stuff that Tim Beckley was putting out, were starting to fall away. And that's how really I got back into communication with Tim Beckley when he started to put out UFO Universe, and contacted me and wanted to know if I wanted to write some articles for this magazine. Before that, when I worked at the station in Dayton, Ohio, back in the 80s, I did an interview with J. Allen Hynek, who was giving a talk at the Wright-Patterson um, Air Force Museum about Project Blue Book. And I was able to put that video up on the CBS News feed, which could then be picked up by any CBS station across the country. Beckley must have seen that at a New York station and got a hold of me and wanted a copy of it. So I made VHS was actually just starting to come out. That's how old I am. VHS was just starting to come out at the time, and the station actually had a VHS machine that I was able to make him a copy and send it to him. And that's really how I first got to know Tim Beckley. But then once I started writing for UFO Universe, it just expanded from there.
incredible.
And Zandy, you were also too. I forgot to say. Now that I'm retired, I'm able to write for 3 magazines: Phenomena magazines, Paranormal Underground magazines, Outer Limits magazine, and a newspaper, Costa Rica Times. So I love being retired because now I have all the time in the world to do this stuff and walk my dogs.
But dude, we were doing that like, hey Tim, you know what? We would do investigations sometimes, and Phil, you know this. Before we even finished, he was already writing, the articles on it and going into his book on it. And he would try to do like it would seem like a book a week, So you guys like when you guys do that type of stuff, it is pretty incredible. And the training you had at school and college, like when my first year of college, I was out at UCB, but I had to take bonehead English subject A. I thought I could write. I thought I was a good writer, creative wise. But when I got to college, they said, "Hey, man, you're in bonehead English," and the teacher would say, "Well, why are you saying this or why are you saying that?" Assuming the reader knows this. And for our final, it was a half hour. She gives you a title to expound upon, and if you can get it right, then you'll move on past subject A. But so I realized she said, "No, I just want to get you with the university standard of writing." But I realize now, people like yourself, people that study, that they can write books. They can have people help them, but they inherently know, something about writing correctly because universities, if you're going to go to college, you're going to study at some point, the teachers are going to make you write correctly at some point.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'd like you. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about writing till I got to college, and not only was I taught creative writing, but also broadcast style writing. I had a minor in journalism, but my major was in broadcasting. And
Wow.
so I was able to take what I learned, especially in writing for television, to make it, as we were taught, the three C's: clear, concise, and conversational. And I try to always use that, in my books. You read so many books where the author is just vomiting words, I suppose, for want of a better. I think really just to fill space and to try to make them
Yeah.
sound smart. And you look at it, and he's like, man, this is somebody that really needs a good editor. And never underestimate the power of a good editor when you're writing. It's really important because unless you can grab the reader and keep him interested, then what you're writing is useless. If the reader is going to read a couple of paragraphs and just get so lost in what you're saying that they toss the book aside.
Yeah, yeah.
I think economy of words, especially in today's day and age, is incredibly important. With a shorter attention span, you have to be able to get your point across in as few words as possible.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, and sometimes that's not necessarily a good thing because like you said, the attention span of readers or viewers is so short anymore. Uh, it's
There's no place for poetry anymore.
no, no, definitely not. What was it? The television show Family Guy. One of the episodes they were doing a video cast. What was it? It was called like the 5 second show. And that's as long as it was, and rarely would they ever get past the introductions. Welcome to the 5 second show. We have a great program tonight. Our guest star. Well, that's it for the 5 second show. And that seems to be where it's going. To especially like a lot of these YouTube
The TikTok generation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, information is going to get lost somewhere along the lines here. You know.
Absolutely. What cracks me up these days is that with everybody has a computer in their hand or in their pocket, and nobody actually looks up stuff to verify whether it's true or not. You just tell them something, and they just run with it. But this thing is Snopes. You could Google it. There's so many God, just so easy to verify a story. Whereas, you know, when I was growing up, if somebody told you something, you had to be like, all right, well, he doesn't seem like he's full of shit. I guess I'll believe it until you find out that, hey, that guy was just crazy.
Yeah, you see photos and videos that are AI generated,
Oh, that's the
and
worst.
and it's all
Now you
fake
can't
stuff.
tell the truth.
Yeah, it's clickbait. I mean, like I just saw a deal where P. Diddy and there's Justin Bieber and then there's the strange position. I'm not going to explain it. And it was AI generated, but it was clickbait. It
What kind of
was like,
videos are you watching, Paul?
Dude, that ain't the worst. AI. It looks like he got on like pink gauchos and a pink, and it looks just like him. And they said no, it was AI. But the new picture of him in the French maid costume, now that doesn't look like AI to me. But who knows?
Ah, what a world.
yeah, yeah.
Anymore. I kind of have a tendency not to trust any photograph that I'm seeing, uh, because it's so easy to to
Yeah, so
generate the
easy to
generate.
manipulate. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you know.
You know, speaking of that, Tim. You know where Phil lives in Miami at the Bayside Mall, they had that big thing that happened, and they had a bunch of people said that their phones were scrubbed. It was military. It was all these policemen there. We know that they said it was a teenage fight, but now the people who came out and said or provided evidence, they've all been. It's like they put the story out there, then somebody came to their house and shook them up, and they changed the story. But then there's all this. What should I say? There's these AI videos that actually look real. Like it looks like the mayor of New York, looks like Homeland Security, and they're saying, "Hey, if you're spreading any of these guys' videos, or if you're, talking about this, this is an investigation. He's an enemy of state and all this." It looks like official. Like it makes you scared to even go to the guy's site. But they've never done that for like a UFO case or some kind of alien case. And it makes you wonder. But the other guys who reported they had no flack, and they have footage outside the mall. He has footage inside the mall. It's just weird. I don't know if you heard about that case, but it's gotten really crazy with
I
the
saw.
because they. Hey, I'm sorry.
No, no, I'm so good. I know exactly the case you're talking about, and I saw the footage from outside the mall where it looked like there was a creature of energy or something, you know, with the police cars out there and all that. And
Yeah, the one
I
by the
guess
by the by the palm tree. Yeah, the one by the palm tree that was working. That now the one in the front that could have been anything, but the guy who had the footage of the whatever it was walking by the palm tree, super
yeah,
tall.
yeah,
People, there was thousands of people that said they saw that, and then they come out and say, "Well, no, the police said there was nothing." And if you listen to everybody's descriptions inside and outside the mall, they were describing like similar things, and they didn't know each other. And it's like, and then they asked one person, he said, "Well, if I could show you what they look like, I've scoured the internet for one picture." And the one picture that he showed, it looked just like the footage that the guy that was inside the mall was showing. And then he comes out and says, "No, I was just making a sci-fi movie. I'm sorry, guys." But he showed videos of them messing with his parents. Um, his little brother was autistic. There was a lot of videos of him in there. It just seemed real, man. I don't know, man. The AI is crazy. It's messing everything up.
the
Oh, it
problem
is.
is,
It is.
yeah, the problem is that even if somebody actually like catches a Bigfoot, right? And has like them sitting in a chair next to him or in a cage or whatever, nobody's going to believe it. It could be 100% real, and now we're in an age where no one's going to believe it because it's so easy to fake a video that anybody
Oh,
will
yeah.
use.
But
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, if the if the Patterson Gimler film of Patty the
Yeah.
Bigfoot came out today, nobody would believe it. It just it's
Right.
and, back when it was shot in '67, a lot harder to fake. Something like that on 16 millimeter film. You know,
And they
nowadays, yeah.
and they say that photographer that did that picture of the Bigfoot had movie experience. Did you hear about that, Tim?
He did it. You're talking about James Patterson.
Yeah, the Patterson.
Jim Patterson, yeah.
Yeah.
No, well, they were out shooting.
Wild.
They were trying to do like maybe a documentary. They'd been interested in Bigfoot for quite a while, and one of their friends had told them that footprints had been found in that area. So they actually got a 16 millimeter camera and horses, and then drove like 400 miles to get to that location, and had been shooting landscape filler material for the documentary when they happened to run across this creature. So yeah, I mean, they had film experience, but when people hear that, they think that maybe they mean like Hollywood film experience, but no, that's not the case.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we actually had on the Paracast a guy who just recently who was a special effect artist for Hollywood and did a number of movies, especially practical effects and ape costumes and things like that. And he wrote a book about the Patterson Gimler film, showing how it wasn't it wasn't fake. He doesn't know what it was, but it wasn't a man in a costume, based on his experience and what materials were available at that time.
Yeah. Good.
We're officially getting close to the longest episode we've ever done. We're out of this track. Thank you for making history with us tonight, Mr. Swartz.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you, Tim.
Well, I had a great time getting into the history books then.
Oh, I got one question, and I always bug Tim. Tim, what is your next book?
We're working on some ideas, but I don't want to say anything right now publicly about what we're doing. And Paul, we've discussed it to a certain extent, so you may know what I'm talking about. But I'm just the only thing I'm going to say is stay tuned for further developments.
Oh,
When the new book does come out, please come back for round 3.
Yeah, round 3.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Tim. All right,
Yes,
it was
thank
great.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It's been wonderful as always, man. Appreciate it.
All right. My pleasure.
All right, fellas. You have a great night. Thank you again.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Guys, take care. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Tim.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Tim.